then
Yeah.
we can end it.
Hi there, everybody. This is the Dorchester team from the Social Impactathon of 2019. We're going to tell you a little bit. We're going to have a conversation about what we thought about the weekend. And we're going to hit on a couple points while we go through. I'm George.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Emerson.
And
I'm Shiva.
And there's Shivank on the phone. He's conferencing in because it's a snowy day in Boston today. We're going to start talking about the environmental justice issues we tried to address with our funding proposal.
Yeah, so in choosing those issues, we sort of drew a web of various issues that result from environmental, that are related to environmental justice, such as housing, racism, education, things like that. And we drew a web between those issues, and we saw that housing was really at the crux of a lot of them. So that was a big focus of our proposal. But we were also mindful that a lot of these issues are interrelated. So we hoped to fund a proposal that would address a lot of these issues, and together they would make a more holistic environmental justice sort of solution.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's most of our focus. All of our organizations that we ended up picking targeted multiple of the different points that we thought were important to include. Only one's focused like largely on housing, but all of them were still very interconnected. And we tried to be really mindful of that as we were narrowing down our choices.
Yeah. Shivank, of the ones we picked, what are some of the environmental justice issues that want some of them specifically addressed, just so that we can get your input here? I feel like
Sure.
it's hard to get you through the phone, so.
Yeah. So out of the environmental justice issues that you guys highlighted, some of the organizations that we researched, including like New Garden Society, they were tackling multiple facets of the overarching problem. So, tackling like working with ex-offenders, so trying to reintegrate them into mainstream society. So they were combating classism and racism, as well as educating this underserved group of the population with skills that they can use to lift themselves and disrupt the loop that perpetuates many of the lives of people in their population.
Well said.
Yeah. And I think we also tried to see if organizations were tackling issues from a more systems thinking approach or a more tangible approach, or both in their programming, and that sort of informed the groups that we decided to choose.
Right. Like we thought COG Design did a great job using their money and their funding directly for programs. So there was a clear cause and effect of their work, and we would put that under the tangible side of the work.
Yeah. And when we were speaking earlier a little bit, some of the things that impressed us about these organizations were how their budgets operated. So they seem to really have a tight revenue and expense sort of budget, which really shows that they have to budget efficiently and spend that money very sagely.
It's hard to believe that a business could run with such a tight budget, and personally, I didn't expect to see the numbers that we were seeing, which were almost identical income revenue. So that's pretty amazing to see.
Yeah, and it really shows how much of an impact this money can make.
Right.
Yeah, it all goes back into the community, which at the end of the day is the most important part of the organizations.
Yeah.
So it's cool to see.
What about lessons learned?
Yeah, lessons learned. I have a good one. Should I start?
Sure.
All right.
No. Yeah.
I thought so. Sort of the Impactathon was sort of framed so that we could see how hard it is to make a decision without being directly involved with the groups.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, first of all, learning that, but then second of all, learning what in the process of trying to figure out make a decision, learning how effective an outsider could be if you put in enough research and think through it well. So I was sort of I learned that to get involved. You don't have to be directly in the community, and you can still put in the work as an outsider and still be involved.
Yeah. I thought that it was, oh gosh, I just lost my train of thought. But yeah, I thought that it was kind of cool that we got to see the other side of things, and that even though we had to cut some of the organizations out of the process, that didn't necessarily mean that they weren't doing like good work. It just meant that it didn't really fit with what we were looking for, and that everyone was equally as impressive and involved in their own way. So I think that for me was the most difficult part of just having to prioritize what we thought fit best.
Shivak, any lessons learned?
Yeah, definitely. I think I would echo what you guys have already surfaced, and then I would say that something that I learned was that, you know, sometimes it may not always be explicit to see, you know, the connectedness to community of the nonprofit and their constituents, but as Rebecca said, like through the language of the research that we conducted, we can kind of deduce how connected they are to the lived experience, and sort of using empathy and judgment to not to fall into a savior complex, but to really truly understand, to involve the community in the process of, you know, the program design, and, you know, therefore serving the community more effectively. So that was definitely a concrete lesson that was like tangible, to see that there's so many ways to look at and evaluate these companies, but it's important for us to take a holistic view and perspective, you know, in addition to the data that we were able to gather, because we're not on the ground level. We never met any of those people, so it was interesting to see how we can develop like a framework to evaluate these companies.
Yeah, and I guess for me, I was really struck by the fact that we might not have heard of a lot of these organizations. We may not have seen them on Facebook or, you know, in the news, social media, but some of the things that they've been accomplishing are just incredible, and it goes to show that not all heroes wear capes, you know, not all things that you don't hear on the news aren't amazing. That's a lot of negatives, but yeah, really impressive stuff, and there's a lot of amazing work happening in the field here in Boston.
Yeah, it's exciting and it's encouraging to get out there and get involved with some of it, so it's nice to see. We're running on 7 minutes and 30 seconds, and I want to make sure we hit our points. We're going to get back to memorable moments probably to wrap up. Do you think we hit rationale, or should we revisit the rationale approach?
I think we covered it.
Okay.
I mean, we can if you want to, but
I guess I thought we had a good system, and this kind of ties into a memorable moment, but I think after hearing all the wonderful keynote speakers' talks, we split up the organizations and took a couple under our watch to learn about them.
Mm-hmm. Divide and conquer.
And then we sort of talked about them to each other to get us all familiarized with them in a deeper level, and then after that discussion talked about our priorities sort of as we're picking organizations we'd like to fund, and we talked about those priorities already. They were the environmental justice issues we were focusing on. Other things were,
you know, aspects informed by the RISE framework, so maybe like their governance, their finances, and then how intentional they were going to be with their funding, what specifically, if they had a specific EJ project that they wanted to fund,
yeah.
other things like that.
Yeah, I would say that the ones who had something more specific in mind that they were willing to share with us from the beginning were a lot easier to be able to like take and say, well, this is what they want to do with the money, so it makes more sense, rather than kind of leaving it up to whatever they may want to do with the money, just because we know that no matter what, it's going to a good place, but it's a little bit easier to know like exactly what it's going to.
Yeah, if you know
Certainly.
exactly what it's going to, it's easier to advocate for them, right?
Yes, yeah, and to track the results later too.
Yeah.
So
Shivank, anything there?
On our rationale,
Oh yeah, the sort of those like coming up with priorities and rationale.
yeah, I think it was interesting because it was hard to weigh one priority over the other because they're all equally important issues when it comes to environmental justice. But we sort of had to figure out like almost a design thinking approach when we were applying like weighted values to our different priorities. So it was interesting to see how we came to a consensus for that.
Yeah, to clarify, we use like a decision matrix and
A systems map.
yeah, a systems map, and we use sort of numerical and then our priorities and the system map to then combo all those factors and make sure we were getting a diverse group that levered each other and hit multiple social environmental justices we were trying to
Exactly.
address.
Yep. Like we deduced, whether they were working on advocacy or youth empowerment, agency, housing, and then we want to see whether like when the actors were working cohesively, are they greater than the sum of its parts?
Yeah.
So I think it's fair to say we had a great weekend. Really learned a lot. Had great team chemistry. Enjoyed the experience, and
Yeah.
it's a good time.
We'd like to say our memorable moment is not a specific moment, but more so the cohesion of this newly found team. The four of us just met on Friday, but we worked really well together, and we were happy to do it.
Thank you, Social Impact Lab.
Thank you.
All right.
It's a wrap.